We all know how great Damian Lillard is. We just don't talk about it enough.
What would it take for Dame to win a chip in Portland?
Leave Portland.
The caption says, "How long should I stay dedicated? How long till opportunity meet preparation?"
Lillard from the corner for three. Won't go. And that'll do it. The Warriors do it again.
Damian Lillard has gone from an all-star type player to an MVP level one in the matter of a few seasons. His limitless range, combined with his killer mentality and countless clutch performances, make him one of the best point guards in the game today. His stats are absolutely off the wall. He shoots incredibly well from downtown and is a top scorer in the league. So, how is it possible that he's never won a ring, let alone make it to the NBA Finals? You could argue it's because of Lillard's bad performances in the past, but the majority of the blame falls on the front office. Have there been times where he hasn't played well in the playoffs? Yes, his series against New Orleans in 2018 was not his best showing, but there's plenty of examples, like most recently in 2021 when Lillard played great, but his team was simply out-talented. Throughout his time in Portland, the roster construction has always been mediocre at best, with Dame putting up great numbers that are ultimately ignored because the team can't win. Similar players in his position would have requested a trade years ago, but Damian has stuck by and remained loyal, with his one goal being a ring for the team that drafted him. Is this goal realistic, or will the Trailblazers continue to face early postseason exits and be forced to move him in the near future? In order to get a clear answer to this question, we must take a look at the history of the Lillard era in Portland, what went wrong in their playoff appearances, and how they wasted Dame's prime. Damian Lillard was drafted in 2012 with the 6th overall pick. He played for Weber State, a little-known college to most NBA fans, and had spent all 4 years there, slowly building up his stats. What Lillard hardly gets credit for is how, since his arrival in Portland, the team has only missed the playoffs once, with that being his rookie season. A guy who's played with only one other All-Star in his career, that being LaMarcus Aldridge, has consistently led his team to the postseason. His first appearance came with defeating the Rockets led by James Harden. He put up 25, 6 and 6 in a series that saw him win in 6, with Dame hitting one of the most iconic shots we've ever seen to win it for the Blazers. This performance showed NBA fans what he was about. In just his second season as a player, he let the world know that he wasn't afraid of the big moment. In the next series, facing off against the San Antonio Spurs, Rip City lost in 5, but Lillard showed flashes. 25 points in a lone Game 4 win was solid, but that was the only positive. The Spurs ended up winning the championship that season. It's quite obvious the Blazers simply ran into a more talented roster. To be defeated by this much in a playoff series should tell any front office that their team needs major improvements, yet nothing of significance changed in the Blazers roster the following year. What many forget is that the 2014-15 Blazers started out very well record-wise. 22-6 is excellent, 30-8 was even better, yet all of that was overshadowed by their second half of the season collapse, where they finished at just 51 wins. 15-14 following the All-Star break was ugly, and the key factor for this failure was injuries. Nicholas Batum suffered a right leg contusion, LaMarcus Aldridge had an upper respiratory infection, and CJ McCollum dealt with a fractured right index finger. That's only the beginning of it. Everyone on the team dealt with something that sidelined them for a short or long period of time. A combined 54 games total were missed among the players. That's not even counting the loss of Wes Matthews, a valued shooter and role player who tore his Achilles in March and missed the rest of the season. They lost 4 members of their starting lineup, Dame himself reportedly having problems with his finger on his shooting hand, which explains the massive drop in three-point percentage. This is one of those years that you can't really blame on the Blazers front office. A completely uncontrollable forgettable situation blew up what was a promising season of contention. By the time they arrived in the playoffs, they were the 4th seed and got destroyed by the Grizzlies in 5 games, a disappointing ending to a season that was truly unfair. The 2015 offseason for the Blazers was an awful one. LaMarcus Aldridge, the all-star power forward who had been with the team since 2006, elected to sign with the San Antonio Spurs in free agency. It would be impossible to replicate what Aldridge brought to the team by just signing someone else, a massive blow that they frankly haven't recovered from. Since his departure, the Trailblazers have been unable to pair Dame with someone of his caliber. Despite this, Damian Lillard remained just as happy and signed a 5-year max extension, a worthy payment for one of the best guards in the league. Besides that, the moves were rather mundane, as you can see. They signed Al-Farouq Aminu, who spent a few seasons with the team and contributed nicely. Everyone else departed. Nicholas Batum was traded, Robin Lopez left, Wesley Matthews left. The team that started with a 30-8 record now lost all of the players that made them so special. Batum was packaged in a deal that gave Portland Noah Vonleh and Gerald Henderson, both players who really wouldn't provide anything worthwhile for Rip City. You'll notice a pattern with the Trailblazers in free agency. Minor moves that make a minor impact. The development of CJ McCollum was also something to watch. The 2013 lottery pick would grow into the second option on offense in the coming years. Despite what many would consider a losing offseason, the Blazers surprised many with how they played in the 2015-16 season. You saw how their offseason transpired. Many believed they would be a bottom team in the West. Instead, it was the opposite. Lillard exploded onto the scene, averaging 25 points per game with 7 dimes on 37% from downtown. They finished with 44 wins on the year, a mediocre record but blowing any expectations that were had of them out the water. This is where Lillard really showed the world he can put a team on his back. The loss of Aldridge may have stung, but Dame was unfazed. An overlooked performance that only Trailblazers fans recognize, but that wasn't the only storyline. CJ McCollum began to grow as a great player, going from 6 points a game to 20, easily taking home the Most Improved Player award. There was work to be done in the playoffs though. First, the Blazers faced the Clippers and beat them in 6. A worthy accomplishment. LA was no easy foe. Dame dropped 32 in a Game 3 dub, which propelled Rip City to win the next 4. The fun came to an end when the Blazers ran into the dynasty in the making, the 73-win Warriors, and got stomped on in 5 games. Portland led throughout the series score-wise, but always collapsed in the 4th quarter. Lillard, however, played like a superstar. He put up 32 a night, shooting 43% from downtown, an excellent showing that will be forgotten about because of the outcome. It's not often that you have to face one of the greatest teams of all time though. The 2016 offseason could be a chance for the Blazers to reconstruct their team and build a true contender. The contracts Portland handed out were questionable then and horrible in hindsight. Evan Turner signed for 4 years, $70 million. Alan Crabb signed for 4 years, $75 million. Maurice Harkless signed for 4 years, $40 million. And Festus Ezeli signed to a 2-year, $16 million contract. Oh, and by the way, Ezeli never played a single game for the Blazers. When asking how the team has ended up in the mediocre position they're in today, there's no better answer than this offseason. An absolute disaster and a failure to build around Lillard. The 2016-17 season arrived, and once again, the team opened up playing poor basketball. They were 10 games below 500 at the All-Star break. The free agent signings obviously weren't working, and the team was injury-riddled for what seemed like the millionth time. The second half of the season saw them go 18-8, finishing with a 41-41 record. Are you beginning to notice a pattern here? The Blazers start off the season struggling due to health issues, then go on a late season run with their guys healthy, and as a result, they shrug their shoulders and say, well, next year we'll be healthy and go on a run. The injury bug hit Yusuf Nurkic the hardest. The Trailblazers had acquired the big man at the trade deadline in a package involving Mason Plumlee and picks, a good move on the surface. However, Nurkic only played 20 games for the team that season because he fractured his leg just a month after being traded, missing the rest of the season. Damian Lillard made another huge jump offensively. Now he was putting up 27 points a night. The playoffs began, and Portland saw themselves at the 8th seed, another season with no chance at a deep playoff run. They met the Warriors for the second straight year, and as you can imagine, got destroyed once again. Yusuf Nurkic did return in Game 3 of that series and played 16 minutes, and instead of losing by 30 like they did in Game 2, the Blazers lost by 6. I guess you can call that progress. In that game, Rip City had an 18-point halftime lead that evaporated in a matter of a few minutes. The team was not healthy, and it showed. Nurkic was not 100%, Ed Davis was out, Aminu was hobbled. It was so bad that Noah Vonleh had to start at center. The Blazers stood no chance, and they were ran off the court. Swept. More mediocrity, more early exits, zero signs of this team moving the needle, and the 2017 draft was a complete dud in itself for Portland. They acquired Zach Collins and Caleb Swanigan during the draft, two players who would provide nothing of real value for the team. With a class as deep and talented as 2017's, you'd expect and hope for better moves, but nothing came. The 2017 offseason was hampered for Portland. They couldn't do much because they had no cap space. Their one trade was a deal sending Allen Crabbe to the Nets just to clear up some money. While other teams were actively making moves and giving out deals, Portland was the only team in the league that didn't make a single signing in the entire offseason. They go 41-41, get swept in the first round, and make zero changes to the team. Does that sound like a recipe for success to you? The 2017-18 season came with the Warriors being overwhelming favorites to take home another championship. Every other team simply had to watch as this super team prepared to destroy everyone in its sight. The Blazers were no different. They were 6 games above 500 at the All-Star break, then had another second half season run, winning 13 in a row to finish with 49 wins total. Yusuf Nurkic was a positive. He didn't fully replicate what LaMarcus Aldridge brought, but he was a high-level big man who fit well. CJ McCollum's stats remained relatively the same. He was the 1-2 punch with Lillard, a productive, scoring, offensive-minded guard who lacked defensively. Because of this, the Blazers' defense in the backcourt was lackluster. There were games when opposing guards went off, and there was nothing Portland could do about it. The Blazers were the 3rd seed, and at this point we all know the infamous story. Portland was embarrassed, swept by the New Orleans Pelicans as Damian Lillard was shut down by their defense. This is the one example where the fault lies heavily on Dame. He played very poor. 18 points per game on 35% shooting is ugly, and a huge drop from his regular season averages. They doubled him on almost every play, and if Lillard got past this and drove inside, they'd have Anthony Davis to block the rim. It's not like he could pass it to his teammates either. At one point, his squad was shooting 25% on open threes. Nothing worked offensively. It was another disappointing exit, but this time for different reasons. The Blazers weren't out-talented as they usually were in the playoffs. This time they played down to their competition and lost a series they could have won. The Blazers could have broken up the backcourt of Lillard and McCollum after such an embarrassing loss, but that didn't happen. In fact, they kept relatively the same pieces they had the year previous. Once again, because of such a terrible 2016 offseason, they had no real options, the biggest move being the re-signing of Yusuf Nurkic for 4 years, $48 million. Seth Curry was also added, a shooter who would end up playing well in a few playoff games. The 2018 draft saw the Trailblazers get Anthony Simons and Gary Trent Jr., 2 young players who have a ton of potential based on who you ask. That's everything. Quite literally the exact same roster, so you'd expect the same bleak outcome in the playoffs, right? The 2018-19 season was the best in years for the Blazers. They won 53 games, and the reason lied in chemistry. This team was fun and finally healthy. Mo Harkless and Al-Farouq Aminu brought defense. Seth Curry and Jacob Layman brought offense off the bench. Yusuf Nurkic was taking the next step as a center, and the Lillard-McCollum backcourt was killing it. But we've seen this story before. A good regular season run means nothing if there's another playoff collapse hiding in the distance. Tragedy struck at the end of the season. Yusuf Nurkic, who had been a key piece for the squad, broke his left leg in March and would be sidelined for the rest of the season. A crushing blow, as a loss this big could hamper any postseason plans, but there was no time to get upset because the playoffs were right around the corner. The Blazers met their rival Thunder in the first round. Dame and Westbrook battled to decide who the better guard was. Lillard averaged 33 points a night on the Thunder's head, with deep threes, terrific finishes, and endless trash talk. He played like a superstar and guided the Trailblazers to a 3-1 lead. Game 5 took place at home, and Dame put up 50 points, including a 37-foot dagger in Paul George's face to win the series and advance to the second round. Anyone who had criticized Lillard throughout the year was silenced. He just put on one of the greatest shows in recent NBA history, putting the team on his back and electrifying the game of basketball with his 35-foot bombs. The Blazers then faced off against the Denver Nuggets, led by Nikola Jokic. Lillard averaged 25 points per game in what was a hard-fought 7-game series. A decisive Game 3 went to 4 overtimes, with the Blazers just barely winning by 3 to take a 2-1 series lead. The Nuggets won the next 2 games in decisive fashion to go up 3-2. This was a do-or-die moment for the team. They could either shrivel up and lose or cement themselves as a legit contender. Portland won Game 6 by 11, with Lillard and McCollum combining for 62, forcing a win-or-go-home game in Denver. Game 7 was a thriller, coming down to the final few minutes, and it wasn't Damian Lillard who took over, but his running mate, CJ McCollum, instead. McCollum was clutch, hitting a deep two-pointer to extend the lead to 3 with just 11 seconds remaining, all but sealing the win for Portland. The Trailblazers have done it. They've advanced to the Western Conference Finals for the first time since 2000, the farthest run in the Damian Lillard era, and one that was unforgettable at that. Let's take a look at who's left for the Blazers to play against. Oh, come on! The Warriors were here again, and the Blazers had to play them for the 3rd time in 4 years. However, things now were a little different. Durant had injured his calf during the previous series against the Rockets and would be out for the foreseeable future, which means that there was a chance, just a chance, that the Blazers could take advantage of the injury-riddled Warriors squad and make a trip to the finals. They got swept. Looking back, it's easy to say that the Warriors were that much better, even without their top 2 player, but if you take a closer look, the Blazers led in 3 out of the 4 games by a good amount, and choked it. They had a 15-point lead at halftime of Game 2, they had a 13-point lead at home during halftime of Game 3, yet each time the result was an L. The Blazers season was over. A tough defeat in what was a magical, expectation-defying playoff run. I have a theory that this here playoff run is the single reason that Portland sees itself in such a mediocre position today. This run gave the organization and front office the false hope that the team didn't need any changes, that they could stay complicit and keep making minor moves. That if Yusuf Nurkic wasn't hurt, the team could have gone all the way. The team wasn't good enough to win it all, yet since they exceeded expectations with this deep playoff run, no changes were made, which hurt the Blazers in the long run. The 2019 offseason began with Portland handing Damian Lillard a supermax and gave CJ McCollum a 3-year, $100 million extension, locking in 2 essential pieces. By handing out all of this money, they did lose some valuable players. Al-Farouq Aminu, Seth Curry, Enes Kanter, Jake Layman, and Evan Turner all departed in the offseason. That's a heap of depth that's hard to replace, and it would show the following season. They did draft Nasir Little, who hasn't shown much yet. By taking him, they missed on better players like Kevin Porter Jr. and Jordan Poole. Their last moves were signing Ken Bazemore and trading Maurice Harkless in a package to bring in Hassan Whiteside. The Blazers started the 2019-20 season with an ugly 5-12 record, one of the worst starts to a season in recent memory, and they responded to this slow start by signing Carmelo Anthony. As always, there were a bit of injuries involved. Rodney Hood tore his Achilles, and Zach Collins was dealing with his fair share of issues. Despite this, Damian Lillard continued to put on a show. He put up a career-high 30 points a night on 40% from downtown, with 8 dimes, by far the best season of his career, as he willed Portland to the 8th seed as the bubble arrived. Carmelo Anthony, Kent Bazemore, Trevor Ariza, and Hassan Whiteside were all in and out of the starting lineups. There was no stability among the team. Fast forward to the bubble, and Lillard flipped the switch, playing great basketball and setting up a matchup with LeBron and the Lakers. Alas, more injuries struck. Yusuf Nurkic returned, but didn't look the same. CJ McCollum revealed he was playing with a fractured vertebrae and wasn't his regular season self. And by Game 4 of the Lakers series, Lillard was sidelined with a knee issue. Despite this, the Blazers surprisingly took Game 1 in the first round. Dame put up 34 with 6 triples, including deep bombs from near half court. It was a great moment for the team, but any hope of a miracle series victory were put to rest as the Lakers easily won the next 4. Rip City had lost again, going from a Western Conference Finals appearance to a forgettable first-round gentleman sweep. The 2020 offseason needed to be a good one for the Blazers. It's been 6 years of non-stop failure for the team and organization. Moves needed to be made. Trades were made though, one of the most notable being Robert Covington, giving up first-round picks and Trevor Ariza to land him. Covington was a more than solid addition. He'd proven to be valuable on any contender and would certainly add much-needed defense to Portland. They signed Derrick Jones Jr. and brought back Rodney Hood, Enes Kanter, and Carmelo Anthony. Many were calling this offseason an A+, praising the Blazers for surrounding Dame with elite talent. The expectations were high for what should be a revenge season. As you can imagine by now, the season was another disappointment. Yusuf Nurkic missed time, Zach Collins barely played, and Derrick Jones Jr. was out of the rotation by the second half of the season. Covington meshed well, proving to be a fine addition, but not a player who moved the needle for Portland. The team needed more. They were 21-14 at the All-Star break, and acquired Norman Powell at the trade deadline, a former champion and high-level scorer. The Blazers went 10-2 in their final 12 games to finish 42-30, better than last year, but no signs of ever being more than mediocre. However, it was a shortened season. Injuries were hitting every team harder than ever. There could be a chance of a miracle run from Portland. They had a first-round date with the Denver Nuggets, a team led by the MVP in Nikola Jokic, but they were also missing Jamal Murray. This could be a chance to take advantage of an undermanned squad. They couldn't even do that. They faltered once again at the hands of a team missing their second best player, losing the series in 6. It wasn't even Lillard's fault this time. The blood was on the hands of Portland's front office. Dame played fantastic, and still it wasn't enough. Is 34 points per game on 45% from 3 and 46% from the field with 10 dimes not good enough for you? Lillard put up 55 points in a pivotal Game 5, and they still lost. He had 37 points in Game 3 that saw Portland lose. There's nothing more he could have done. The Blazers have failed for the 7th straight time, and Damian Lillard should be requesting a trade, but he hasn't. What gives? Dame prides himself on being a man of loyalty. No matter how bleak the situation may be, he still has trust and confidence that his front office will bring him the players needed to win. The perfect example of this took place on Instagram last year, when Paul George and Lillard got into a bit of a feud. Lillard telling George he ran away from the grind by switching teams. In such a star-driven league where players can request trades in the snap of a finger, to see Dame stick in place after 7 years of failure is more than respectable. But at what point do you drop the act and realize your team won't win? Perhaps Lillard is realizing this. All signs point to this being his final year as a Trailblazer, and if we're being quite honest, the roster in place is not good enough to win a championship. They fired longtime coach Terry Stotts and hired former NBA player Chauncey Billups as his replacement. They traded for Larry Nance Jr., which is a fine addition all things considered, but he's not a player who increases your championship hopes dramatically. We could very well see the words "Damian Lillard has requested a trade" highlighting the NBA world in the near future. Don't be surprised if it happens, because the Portland Trailblazers wasted Damian Lillard's prime with mediocre roster construction and poor free agent choices. Yet it's all been excused because they have one of the most loyal players in today's game.